Alright, so here is our lesson for today. So get out your notebook, we'll take some notes. This is titled 3.4, Domain and Range, and this is day 1 of Domain and Range. So write that down and let's get started. First, we'll take some time to review the coordinate plane. This is the coordinate plane. So we want to write some of these notes down. It has a horizontal x-axis and a vertical y-axis that intersect at a point. That point is called the origin, where they intersect. So this is y, this is x. An ordered pair is a location on the coordinate plane. The first number is the x-coordinate, and the second is the y-coordinate, so x, y. So 2 is x, and y is 3. So remember, you run before you jump, so you go left or right first on the x-axis with the first number, and then up and down with the second number. The quadrants are the 4 regions created by the x-axis, so we have quadrant 1, where both the x and the y are positive. We have quadrant 2, where the x is negative and the y is positive. We have quadrant 3, where both x and y are negative. And quadrant 4, where x is positive and y is negative. So be sure to write all of this down into your notes. So here in this example, write this down. We want to plot the points on the graph and identify what quadrant they are located. So remember to run before you jump. The first number is the x, the second is the y. This is the x and this is the y. So you'll probably need to get graph paper to do this. So you're going to go over, run to 9, start at 0, or start in the middle, and go over to 9, and then up to 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, make sure I did that right. Then this is A, so we'll label that as A. And then negative 3, so we're going to go over to 3, down to negative 1. So that would be negative 3, negative 1. Actually, let's not do negative 3, negative 1. Let's just put point B. So let me start that again. Do B. All right, now point C is negative 4. So left to 4 and then positive 3. So that would be there. And that's going to be point C. Point D says 0, 3. 0 means we don't go left or right. We stay there and we jump up to 3. So that's going to be D. And then E is positive 1 and then down to negative 3. Now we want to identify the quadrant that these are in. So A is going to be in the first quadrant. So we'll put first quadrant. And then B is going to be in the third quadrant. So you go counterclockwise. So that's 1, this is 2, that's 3, and this is 4. So point B is going to be in the third quadrant. Point C would be in the second quadrant. D is not in a quadrant, it is on the y-axis. So if it's on the axis, it is not in a quadrant. And then 1, negative 3, that's point E. That's going to be in the fourth quadrant. Okay, so be able to locate points and what quadrant they are in. Okay, so let's review some stuff that we've had in our notes. You want to probably write this down again. A function, remember, is a dependency relationship where the input values, that means your x values, do not repeat. So to determine if a relation is a function, you can compare the x values, which we did last time in our notes, or you can do a vertical line test. So we're going to talk about the vertical line test today. So you want to write this down. So there's 2 ways to determine if it's a function. Compare the x values, make sure the x's don't repeat, or you can simply do a vertical line test if you've been given a graph. Alright, so again, let's review domain and range. Domain, remember, is your input values, your x. It is the independent variable. And then range is your output values. It is the dependent variable, and that is going to be your y. Okay, have that in your notes, please. Okay, so here we have an example. You want to draw this, graph this in your notes. This is an example, I guess example 1. So is this graph a function? Well, let's see. First we need to know what our x and y values are. So we want to first get the points. I believe these might be the points that we started with. So the points are, let's see, we have 9, 1 here. And then we have 1, negative 3 here. So you need to know what the points are to be able to determine. This is 0, 3. And then this is negative 3, negative 1. And this is negative 4, 3. Okay, so now that we know what our points are, we need to answer this. Is it a function? Well, first we have to compare the x values. So what is the domain? The domain is all your x's. So our x's are, let's start with negative 4. So negative 4, and then 0, and then 9, and then negative 3, and then positive 1. So do the x's repeat at all? Well, they do not. So is the graph a function? Yes, because the x's do not repeat. So then what is the range? So we're just going to list our range. So I have a positive 3, but I have it twice, so I'm just going to write it once. And I have a positive 1. Remember, these are your y values. I have a negative 1, and I have a negative 3. So that's the domain, the range, and we know that it is a function because the x's do not repeat. Okay, one of the things that you're going to be asked to do is to look at a graph and identify the domain and the range from a graph. And the way we write the domain and the range from a graph is that you're going to write it as kind of like an ordered pair, where the least x value would be on the left and the greatest x value is going to be on the right. The same thing with the range. The least y value would be on the left, and then a comma, and then the greatest y value. And this is the way you're going to write the domain and the way you'll see it from a graph. Now this is when you're reading it from a graph. So let's look at an example. Okay, the next thing you need to know is the vertical line test. So for the vertical line test, it says this: a relation represented by a graph is a function provided that no vertical line passes through more than one point on the graph at a time. So what you have to do to do the vertical line test is hold a straight edge like a pencil vertically over the graph. Start at the left hand side and move along the graph toward the right. The graph should touch the vertical line at only one point at any time. If the graph touches the vertical line at 2 or more points at any time, then the graph is not a function. If the graph touches the vertical line at only 1 point at a given time, then the graph is a function. This allows you to quickly tell whether the given relation is a function. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take and you're going to draw a straight vertical line over a graph. If it touches the graph in more than one spot, then it is not a function. If it touches it at only one spot, then it is a function. So we'll look at some examples. So you need to have like a summary of this in your notes. Okay, so here we have an example, and it gives us a graph and it wants us to decide, is the graph a function, what is the domain, and what is the range. So remember, the domain is your x values and the range is so that's your x and this is your y values. So we're trying to determine what are the minimum and maximum x values for this graph and the minimum and maximum range values for this graph. So remember, we write it, and I'll just show you. Alright, so look at this. First, is it a function? And remember the vertical line test. If I can draw a vertical line anywhere on that graph, will it cross at only one point? And yes, it will. If I draw a vertical line anywhere on that, it will cross at only one point. So yes, it is a function. The domain, remember, you're going to list the the least x value and the greatest x value. So if you look that the least x value is right here, and the greatest x value is going to be right here. So this is your x. So you're looking from left to right, from left to right. The least x value will be right here, and the greatest y value will be right there. So if we name this point, the point on either end, that's going to help us. So this point is -4, 3, with my x value being a -4. And this point is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, with my x value being a 5. So x goes from -4 here all the way over to 5. So the way we write that, that means the domain is -4, the least value, all the way to the greatest value. So that would be the domain. The range then is going to be how far up the graph goes and to how far down the graph goes. So the graph starts up here at 3. This is where y equals 3 right here. And then this is where it goes to where y is equal to 0. So 3 and then 0. All right, so the range then, you start with the least amount, and the least is 0, and the greatest was 3. And that's how we write our domain and range. All right, let's do another one. All right, we're going to do the vertical line test again. And here this summarizes the vertical line test. So let's look at a couple of examples. Okay, it says to determine if each of the following graphs represent a function. So look at this one. This is a graph of this line. And if I use the vertical line test, I take this line and I move that line anywhere across this graph, will it touch the graph at more than one spot? And the answer would be no. So is this a function? Oh, sorry, my bad. Since it only touches at one spot, yes, that would be a function. If you look at the second graph, example 5 here, you can see that if I take this line and I put it right there or put it right there, anywhere along there, it's going to cross at 2 spots. Or if I put it here, it's going to cross at 2 spots. So because I can put it on that line and it crosses at 2 spots, is it a function? No, it does not pass the vertical line test. All right, for the next one, I can draw a vertical line here. I can draw a vertical line there. No matter where I draw the line, it's only going to cross at one point. So is it a function? Yes. So go ahead and do graphs that look like this on your paper and do the vertical line test on it and take your notes. So hopefully you understand what a vertical line test means. If not, you'll ask me in class. And that's going to be it for today. Today we talked about vertical line test, and we talked about domain and range. That was the key, and knowing how to write domain and range from a graph. So hopefully you'll have an introduction to this, and I can show you more in class on how to do this. All right, have a great day.